Unfortunately, my departure for Stable 99 was going to have to wait a little while. I was sick. Sick. I'd almost prefer dying of radiation sickness to coughing, hacking, and generally feeling miserable. I know, Rampage was in an infinitely worse place than me, but she was simply dealing with a second childhood. Or third. Maybe fourth. And at the moment there was nothing I could do as they put me upstairs in Marigold's old bed. Sakashi stopped by to administer her healing draughts and brews. Apparently, a zebra who didn't know how to mix simple concoctions was merely a striped pony. I know they may have smelled foul, but they were far better than the boiled leaves Glory brewed up. I was also admittedly curious about zebra culture. Pretty much all I'd learned about them was that they were the enemy during the war. To hear her speak of it, the zebras had once lived in tribes across a vast grassland. Most were nomadic, though legends and archaeological evidence indicated that this might not have always been the case. And rather than set up large towns and cities, they simply established a few buildings for healing and protecting their wells. Unlike Equestria, which had tamed most of its wilderness, the zebra lands have been rife with monsters and threats. These were respected by the zebras, and zebra bucks and mares would test themselves against these threats. What they lacked in unicorn magic, they made up for with rare and potent magical talismans. Apparently, a long drought changed much of this way of life. With the savanna dying, zebras were forced to gather in villages and cities built around water sources, and with the zebras no longer able to just move away from them, competition with natural predators became acute. A decade or so later, the land's gem deposits were exhausted, and the dearth of gems that were the foundations of the zebra's magical talismans threatened their survival. They found a twofold solution in Equestria. Equestria was industrializing, and many of the technologies it was beginning to develop held promise of replacing the need for talismans altogether. At the same time, though, Equestria had large supplies of gems, and fortunately for the zebras, its burgeoning industry also meant burgeoning demands for energy. Demands that the quickly dwindling Equestrian coal supplies were unable to meet. Agreements were made. Equestria would supply the zebras with gems and give zebra industrialization a boost with the knowledge and technology for coal mining, and in return, the zebras would send coal to Equestria. The demand for mining and the desire for technology completely changed their nomadic way of life. The zebra lands were tamed and exploited for their resources, and the zebras began to develop their own technologies, both earth pony-like and alchemically based, to supplement and enhance their traditional tools and talismans. The Kaisar, the last to occupy a position that was formerly just a sort of highly experienced diplomat in charge of settling the largest intertribal disputes, took up the increased power the sedentary lifestyle had given him, and declared a bold new future. But it was not easy. The zebras, experiencing the same sort of technological growth as Equestria, also began to experience the same sorts of unsteady social changes. City dwelling was no longer something in legends, done by only a few small tribes, or done to weather a drought. Now, it was the norm. Railroads snaked across the land, turning journeys that might have once been weeks of hard travel into a few days in a well-appointed coach. The increasingly unified zebra military, armed with new weapons and new magic, stopped simply keeping the beasts away, and began to hunt them down. New thoughts shot through zebra culture like lightning, and among them was one that began to climb to a dangerous boil. Most zebras had never been able to spare much thought for how things were elsewhere. They'd been too busy surviving, and it wasn't as if things in faraway lands would matter much to them. Those who did think about it, though, tended to be quietly resentful of Equestria. Equestria, chosen land of the living goddesses, where the monsters were tame and even the seasons were ordered for the pony's comfort. Still, that resentment hadn't mattered much. Equestria didn't care much about the zebras, and the zebras couldn't do anything about the ponies. The first wake-up call came when Nightmare Moon returned and delayed the dawn. That was when the resentment started to rise, but there was still nothing those bearing it could do. Then, years later, the trade agreements were signed, and though they were very good for the zebras, they were even better for Equestria. The zebras were paying in coal 10 times what the ponies were paying in gems. And those gems were even more valuable to the zebras now than before. The new industries might have reduced the relative utility of the old talismans, but at an even higher rate, they were creating new uses for enchanted gems. With all of this and more beneath the surface, it took only a small nick to start the process that would end with the world exploding. The hostage crisis was that nick, and the disaster proceeded from there. The Kaiser withheld the coal until fairer terms could be negotiated. In response, Equestria withheld its gem shipments. Pony power, transportation, and manufacturing were cut back, then cut back again. Zebra industry faltered as the gem supply dried up, and the campaign against the monsters of the land found itself expanding beyond the capabilities of its suddenly reduced supplies. This only further increased Zebra reliance on coal-fueled technology, increasing the domestic demand for coal and decreasing the demand for foreign gems. Peaceful diplomacy failed, and Equestria, desperate as its ponies lost the infrastructure they'd come to rely on, began seizing coal shipments by force. It was curious, almost cute, to hear about the first battles. Great care was taken to minimize casualties. Prisoners were exchanged immediately. Medical care offered. Meanwhile, Celestia constantly strove for some sort of armistice. But as the war progressed, the fighting grew worse. Weapons development, new combat spells, and dangerous new talismans pushed the destruction onward. Every pony and zebra involved seemed to agree that the fighting should stop, but none were able to let the other side fire the last shot. Zebra refugees and displaced ponies became increasingly common, and violence and resentment against them grew. Then came the Little Horn Massacre. I only knew it as a footnote in my history books. The attack on a school prompted Celestia's abdication, and an elevation of Princess Luna to the throne. I hadn't known that it had been Luna's school. I didn't realize that the attack had employed a terrible new poison talisman. The Kaiser denied that the school had ever been a target, and said that the weapon had been lost and would never have been authorized. But the slaughter changed everything. No pony was interested in peace anymore. The only drive was to win, at any cost. Of course, the burning of Hoofington came soon after, and the reconstruction soon after that. It was as if, once unified in a common direction, ponies raced to discover how much they could do. No pony had seen that the new horizon they were facing towards was a cliff. Wait.
Some pony did,
I muttered.
Some pony knew.
I remembered the museum, and the cakes. Some pony had known the day and the hour, and had taken steps. But for what? I couldn't imagine. You gave me your damned cold, P21 muttered as he visited me with his own runny nose.
Oh, I gave you nothing. You stole it,
I retorted as I lay in bed. Well, take it back then, he muttered, sneezing hard. Oh, that is just disgusting. He stuck his tongue out at the snot on his hoof. Ugh. I hate being sick.
Apparently, stable ponies catch it more easily. We're lucky we're in chapel where there's not a lot of enervation. If we were in flank, this could take days to get over.
I sipped from one of Sakashi's bottles.
You should try some of this. I think I've coughed up every color of the rainbow, but I feel better.
Yeah, pass. Those zebra drinks taste like mare ass, he said as he stuck his tongue out. I rolled my eyes.
Please, do you even know what mare butt tastes like?
He looked at me, Well, it depends on how clean she keeps herself back there. I winced as he reached over and pretended to read the label on the back. Oh, look. Side effects may include nausea, loss of appetite, rainbow snot, and putting all 4 hooves in your mouth. He took a drink and his eyes widened, his navy mane frizzing as he jerked. Ugh. Okay. It tastes worse than...
I defer to your experience,
I said quickly. He took another drink and then sighed, setting the bottle back on the nightstand. I also want to apologize. I know you're trying hard. Harder than any of us. I just didn't handle it well.
I'd be scared if any of us did, P21.
I said as I leaned back in the bed, looking at the moon painted on the ceiling.
I'm sorry too. I want to save her. I do. And Thorn. And Roses. And Flank. Why is that so hard?
Because it's better. It would have been easier to leave Roses and Thorn in that ruin, or right off Flank. That's what I would have done. He sighed and shook his head. You want to know what bothers me the most, though? I cringed inwardly, but nodded. I really didn't care that she was dead. It was wrong and all. Completely messed up. But I was more angry that Rampage didn't get punished for it.
She is,
I pointed out. Maybe. I'm not quite sold on the not crazy mare still innocent of killing a foal somehow because she still feels really bad about it theory, he said with a wave of a hoof. And I still want to know what Lacunai's angle is.
Maybe she just wants to help make the wasteland better.
I don't think she has a clue what she really wants. Or this goddess. I talked with priests about it. Apparently there's acolytes all over the wasteland selling this whole unity religion. An alicorn takes you away to become one with the goddess. Catch is, no pony ever comes back, he said as he rubbed his nose.
Apparently I'm too damaged for unity,
I said with a rueful smile.
And too whiny.
He wasn't smiling. Blackjack. No pony is too damaged for unity. They'll take any pony. Murderers, rapists, raiders, slaves. It doesn't matter. I can't really believe that they'd turn any pony away for being too whiny. I frowned at that.
Maybe. I just don't understand where the goddess ends and Lacunai begins. She sounds like she's a part of it, but not. She said something about Hoofington being full of nightmares.
I caught his look and chuckled, then coughed, hacked, brought up something a decidedly bleh color, and spat it into a rag before shaking my head.
Ew. Anyway, not normal nightmares. Scary dreams. It's definitely an alicorny thing.
Well, he said as he wiped his nose on his leg. Just don't let this bite us in the tail. I mean, I know you want to help her, but she and her goddess are one great big unknown. Okay? I sighed and nodded, taking another sip of the tasty medicine. It was kind of like licorice. Salty licorice? P21 relaxed a bit. So, last question. What are we going to do at Stable 99?
Take it over,
I replied calmly as I rubbed my bruised throat.
I mean it. If Mom won't listen, I will shoot her until she does. I will feel very guilty about it afterwards, but I'm not going to let that place continue.
Then I took a deep breath.
After that, anyone who doesn't like the new rules can have fun in the wasteland.
He looked at me with a sigh. I noticed that plan doesn't have anything about punishing them for what they did. I closed my eyes.
Sorry. I'm not an executioner. I'd give you the overmare if I could, but Deus took care of that.
Well, get back to Stable 99 and take over. I assume Prophet follows on step 3. He crossed his forelegs on the edge of my bed as he cocked his head. And if it doesn't go to plan?
Drink some wild Pegasus, sing some dirty limericks, shoot a lot, and try not to die,
I said as I looked him in the eye.
But I'm not leaving there till it's taken care of, P21.
Good. That I can live with, he said softly.
I know you don't believe it,
I said with a smile.
but most of Stable 99 are good ponies. We won't have to kill them all.
Because if we did, then I was going to follow them. But I couldn't believe Mom and the others would hold on to rules that weren't even a part of the stable to begin with. You're an optimist, Blackjack. Still, while I'm not sure about their goodness, I'm pretty sure they aren't going to go out of their way to screw us. If they have a choice, then they'll do what's easier. He gave my hip a nudge. I'll be honest. Fighting you is hard. I smiled at that. I needed to make business cards. Security. Don't fight me. It's hard. And what about afterwards?
I'll put Mom in charge as the new overmare and put them in contact with Bottlecap. There's got to be valuable things to trade. Trade will save the wasteland. That's what Bottlecap told me,
I said with a smile.
Then we get to routing the next destination for EC-1101. And maybe make a little stop at Hippocratic Research. See if I can't talk Sanguine into giving up on it.
That sounds good, he said, actually sounding impressed. Then he chuckled. You know that something's going to go wrong.
Yeah, probably Sanguine,
I said, rolling my eyes.
The Zodiacs knew that I was at Stable Tech R&D. He'll probably guess that I'll head to Stable 99 to find the routing. He's probably going to throw every raider, bandit, and slaver he has against me. Probably why DJ Pony said the area was so much more hostile now.
I brought up my pip buck and tapped the screen. The sleek black display showed the navigation tool in soft, cool blue. I was amazed at how many places I'd reached in the last few weeks.
Ditzy is flying back to New Appaloosa tomorrow. She can drop us off at Miramare. From there, it's 2 days to Megamart and 2 more to Stable 99.
That's quite a bit of ground to cover. Any chance Ditzy could fly straight to Stable 99?
She's not a taxi. 99 is way out of her way. And we used up most of our caps paying for EC-1101.
Most of that money went to Ditzy for flying all the way out to Hoofington and back. A trip she usually risked only every other year or so.
We can't keep her from her business just to save us some walking.
He made a face. Oh, all very well for you, he said with a grimace. All of your legs work.
Hey, my knees are half shot too after jumping off that catwalk, I reminded him.
I could have taken a Hydra, but after all the damage done to me by the drug, not to mention seeing the manufacturing process, I'd rather wait a bit instead. He looked a little unconvinced.
It'll work out. And just think, in a few days, we'll be able to set Stable 99 right once and for all.
He rubbed his chin. Well, that's a point. Maybe, though, we could find one of those magic flying wagons of our own. That would make travel much easier.
I doubt that Glory would be up to flying us all over the hoof,
I said, not sure if a Pegasus lift was related to their size. Then again, Ditzy wasn't the largest pony in Equestria, and her wings didn't even have feathers. So I didn't know how it worked. Well, nothing new there. Blackjack, Glory would fly through fire if you asked her to, P21 pointed out. I flushed a little.
It's not like that. She's... It just feels weird to lust after her. And I'm not going to exploit her crush on me. So we'll stick to the plan.
Maybe. I don't know. It just seems that every time you have a plan, it ends in disaster and heartbreak, he said as he rose. I should go make sure we have everything we need. Leaving me in bed presented an interesting problem. On one hoof, I was tired. On the second, I felt too rotten to sleep. On the third, I wouldn't feel anything if I was asleep. But on the fourth, my dreams were full of the sound of crunching foals and Thorn singing Hush Now. However, being stuck in bed felt suspiciously like waiting, and I'd finished my gun magazines and the hoof-to-hoof training manual. Then, in desperation, I'd even tried reading one of P-21's arcane science books. There simply wasn't any way to make arcane radiation gem reactors and spark generation as thrilling as reading about fallen Kaiser fighting techniques. And don't get me started on his books on locks. Well, I still had 2 more memory orbs I hadn't viewed yet. Theoretically, I was safe as houses, provided no stealth zebras or ghost unicorns attacked. I levitated the 2 from my bag. I still didn't want to view the blood-stained orb, so I lifted the 3rd. Then frowned and floated Cupcake's revolver into my bed. Slipping it under my pillow, I breathed out and touched the orb with my magic. And nothing. Not that it was locked or anything. It was just that I could feel Stonewing being merged with a cockatrice, sense the creature squirming inside me as I shifted and distorted. It made my hide crawl. I took several deep breaths, closed my eyes, and tried again to coax myself to make the connection. Nothing. I was sick. I was tired. My horn sucked. Always decent explanations, but somehow they didn't comfort me. How would I learn about the projects and see the Marauders if I couldn't even get my horn to make the connection? I lay back in the bed, staring up at the moon. Had Marigold felt this way when she was being slandered and torn down by the system that had happily put her in harm's way? Exhausted, disconnected, alone? I tried to make the connection again and again, before finally dropping the orbs back into my bag and turning over in bed. Just one more thing I couldn't do. I sat alone on a mountain. It shifted and rumbled beneath me, but I could almost reach the clouds. If I could reach them, I could tear them aside and see the stars again. Don't look down, rasped the old voice with a chuckle. Care for a game, blackjack? Draw poker? Hearts? Go fish?
Very funny,
I muttered. I try. We've got that in common. I stretched and strained to reach the clouds.
Go away.
Just a little bit farther. Hey, you're the one dreaming me. You wake up, he said with that purring of his cards. So, what are you trying to do?
Get to the stars, I replied. If I can reach them, maybe they can help me.
Sakashi told you they were dangerous.
Only to selfish ponies who try to use them to become super powerful and stuff,
I said as I started to push the clouds aside.
I am going to use them to help.
I wobbled as the rocks beneath me shifted a little, but I kept my eyes turned upward.
Nothing bad is going to come of that.
So thought Fluttershy, he rasped. But you saw what came of trying to force a better pony.
Well, making the wasteland happy then.
And that's Pinkie Pie's thinking. You're just going from bad to worse now, he said as he shuffled the cards beneath me. Come on down from there, Blackjack, before you hurt some pony.
I can't. I've got to help,
I said as I finally pushed the clouds aside. I could see the twinkling lights. Help who? The dealer asked from below. Why?
Because I'm going to turn into a monster if I don't,
I said as I reached up and pinched a star between my hooves. It glowed like a memory orb, but hot and terrible. Oh, really? Then what are you now? The dealer asked. I looked down to tell him to shut the fuck up and I stood on P-21's corpse. And Glory. Rampage. Lacunae. Bottle Cap and Caprice lay further down the slope of corpses. Roses embraced the crushed body of her foal. Dozens of crusaders lay still in their tattered cloaks, the filly patches fluttering softly in the breeze. Hundreds of ponies in Stable 99 barding. Thousands of ponies dressed as raiders. Enclave Pegasi littered the slope like broken birds. At the edge of my sight loomed the blasted corpse of Deus, the pulped remains of Gorgon, the smoldering body of Blue Blood. And past them, the bodies continued farther and farther till they blended with the horizon. Told you not to look down, the dealer said, sitting on Rampage's face. The mass then shifted, and the slope collapsed beneath me. I fell through the darkness, my friends' bodies burying me in a crush of limbs, the star coolly looking on between my hooves. I jerked awake, knocking the box of Vanity's memory orbs across the sheets and sending them rolling across the wooden floor. I looked around, the images of the stars no longer quite so comforting. I sat up in bed, curling and pressing my head between my rear knees as my forelimbs hugged my head tight.
Please, don't take that from me. Don't take the stars,
I whispered to my poor, crazy brain. I finally calmed down enough to climb down off the bed and gather up the fallen memory orbs. One must have rolled under the bed, and I huffed softly as I lay down on my stomach and peeked under for the orb. Wait. Orbs? 2 memory orbs glimmered at me from under the bed. What, were they inbreeding now? Very carefully I pulled the pair out. One was quite dusty. I put Vanity's orb back in the case, looking at the newcomer. Marigolds. I touched it to my horn.
Please, 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 please,
I begged, trying to make my horn work. A flicker, and the world faded away. The unicorn mare fit me like a sock. Even her glasses felt like my glasses. Her headache matched my own. All she needed now was a runny nose and a scratchy throat, and we'd be interchangeable. I also knew this building. This was the Fluttershy Medical Center, and I even knew this hallway, even though it wasn't half lit and painted with a blood-lettered play. She stepped into Redheart's office. I at once noticed that the stacked-up papers and files seemed even higher than when I'd visited. The tired mare behind the desk pushed her glasses back and gave a frayed smile at my host.
Thank you for coming, Marigold. I know this is terribly short notice. Well, you made it sound like this was life or death,
Marigold said in a soft and thoughtful voice, edged with some tension.
Why else would you ask me to come here in the middle of the night?
Redheart trotted around from behind the desk to put a hoof on Marigold's shoulder.
I know this has been a very difficult time for you. Difficult?
Marigold said in a soft, taut voice.
spending 3 years of my life on a dream I've had for as long as I can remember, only to get pulled away for a medical review 2 weeks before the launch? Yeah, I suppose that counts as difficult. It's been challenging for all of us with the assassination attempt. Big Macintosh's funeral last week and all. Well, yes. Difficult.
Redheart then pushed a file towards Marigold, and she glanced down. Marigold. P. H. Medical authorization denied. And then atop it, medical waiver. Approved. Her eyes went over those stamps once, and then twice.
So I'm glad to make things a little less difficult for you. But why?
Marigold asked in shock.
Because we've reviewed the test results for your heart and found them less severe than we anticipated. And because Fluttershy knows what it's like to have a dream. And because we need your help.
Marigold frowned as she walked to a cushion and took a seat across from the elderly mare. Redheart gave a small smile.
Fluttershy has a dire medical emergency involving a pregnant mare. Without your help, she may lose the foal. My help? But how can I help? I'm an astropony and an astronomer. I don't know anything about medicine. Fluttershy wishes to perform a procedure that will transfer the foal from the patient to you, making you a surrogate mother.
Marigold's ears stood almost upright at this.
You want me to do what? To have a baby? Yes,
Redheart replied calmly.
Afterwards, she'd be transferred to an MOP full services caregiver. You wouldn't be expected to raise her or anything like that.
As Marigold balked, Redheart continued.
I know this is hard. Normally, we wouldn't even attempt a surrogacy spell like this without far more preparation and counseling. But when we reviewed your files, we found you to be the ideal candidate. And time is critical.
Marigold looked at the file, and then at Redheart.
And does this waiver disappear if I say no?
And from her tone, I knew that she'd walk if it did, even if it cost her her dream.
No, Marigold. That was Fluttershy's and my final decision. You don't have to do this.
But from the look in the pale pony's eyes, it was clear that she was desperate for Marigold to agree.
But we certainly hope you will.
Marigold reached up, rubbing her temples with her hooves.
It's going... Oh... Don't you realize it's going to be pretty funny if all of a sudden I look pregnant? The foal is currently the size of a chicken egg. It'll be months before you start to show. Not to mention suspicious that I was turned down and then got a waiver. Some pony's going to raise a red flag,
she said as she chewed on a hoof nervously.
It might, maybe, foul up the mission. Well then, in that case, you should say no.
Redheart replied in a no-nonsense tone.
I know you're willing to face terrible risks. This is no less risk. Perhaps even more dangerous than going to the moon. But I can tell you that the mother needs this. Fluttershy needs this. And I think that a great many ponies will need it too, even if they never realize it. This is your chance to save one pony.
I'd do it. But then I'm an idiot. Marigold sighed as she looked at Redheart.
I almost wish you'd blackmailed me. It'd be easier,
she said with closed eyes.
All right,
she finally agreed. What came next were a number of papers signed in a flurry. Clearly, she wasn't reading them all, just signing on the X's. Then 2 unicorns gave her a number of injections. But I was relieved that none of them seemed to involve the horrible rainbow-colored sludge I'd seen with Gorgon's memory. Now definitely woozy, she was led into a room decorated like a forest, There were actually living tree branches coming out of the walls. I wondered what kind of spell did that. A veil of leaves separated one half of the room from the other. On the far side of that thin barrier, a mare sobbed inconsolably.
Shh. It'll be all right,
Fluttershy said calmly over and over again. The mare spoke in a voice thick with grief.
You must think I'm terrible. I am terrible, Fluttershy.
She stammered around the tears.
No, I don't think that anymore. I think you're sad and hurting. And if I can help, I will.
A blue eye peeked through the fall of leaves.
Oh, the doctor's here. Are you absolutely sure?
Fluttershy said, and there was another sob.
Okay then. Just a little shot and we'll get started.
The mare's thick voice said softly,
Fluttershy, can you take it all away? Please? I can't. There's so much.
A soft sigh.
Of course. You keep my secret, I'll keep yours.
Be kind. Then, a few minutes later, Fluttershy stepped through, giving Marigold a teary-eyed look and throwing her forelegs round the mare, bringing her into a tight hug.
Thank you so much.
Marigold relaxed and put her forelegs around Fluttershy, returning the gesture.
She doesn't know, does she?
Marigold said softly. Fluttershy shook her head.
She couldn't bear it if she did. She has so much to do, so very much to do that she was willing to give up her baby.
She looked back at the leaves.
If the public found out, she'd be finished.
And if they found out about this, she'd be equally finished.
But who?
Marigold started to say before she shook her head.
I guess it's better if I don't know.
Fluttershy gave a sad smile and nodded.
Hopefully when the war is over, she'll be strong enough to remember and meet her again. And she'll have the opportunity. Thanks to you.
Fluttershy took her hooves.
I know a lot of ponies look up to you for going into space and all, but this makes you my hero.
I don't know about Marigold, but I felt damn good about that. When I opened my eyes, I stared up at the ceiling, feeling rather conflicted. Well, that was nothing new. Every single time I went into an orb, it felt like Blackjack was getting a little more scrambled up with other ponies. Was I learning? Maturing? Or was I actually doing some kind of inherent harm to myself with these memories? Had Marigold selflessly become a surrogate? Or had she feared that Fluttershy and Redheart would rescind her waiver? And what of the mare that was behind the veil? Was she wrong to have wanted to enter pregnancy not knowing that Fluttershy had an alternative? Who had she been? Important, obviously. A ministry mare? Now that was a scandalous thought. Or even one of the princesses. Or maybe I was thinking too grandiose and she'd just been a mare that Fluttershy wanted to help. I pulled a pillow over my face.
Oh, why can't anything be black and white?
I shouted into it. Everything had to be so tangled. I sighed, then pulled the pillow away, looking at the moon overhead. Marigold had gotten her dream, but the scandal had destroyed her. The nameless mare had suffered terribly, but did that make it right?
Why am I the pony that gets stuck thinking about this? Because you care,
Lakunai said softly beside me. I jumped so hard that I fell out of bed in a tangle of sheets. The alicorn cocked her head as she looked at me lying on the floor.
Are you all right? Don't do that!
I panted, feeling my heart thud.
I've had bad experiences coming out of memory orbs.
Which was probably why I had so much trouble getting into them.
Forgive me,
She said politely.
I hope it was a pleasant memory. It was complicated.
Slowly I rose to my hooves.
What are you doing? Waiting. Glory is attempting to cook. Her cooking is not going well, though, so I thought it best to check on you and get away from the smell.
She said as she looked at the memory orb.
So, is it worthwhile? Oh, more questions,
I whined, but looked at the orb.
What do you mean? We live within our memories, and the memories of each other. The goddess directs, and we act. But within her we flow from dream to dream and thought to thought. I can no longer remember which are my own, and which are the dreams of the goddess.
I wondered if that was why I was having so much trouble entering the memory orbs. Was I afraid of changing?
Do you, or the goddess, know anything about magic?
Lakunai actually smiled broadly, and my answer was within that smile.
Okay. Dumb question, I guess. But I'm wondering about something Sakashi told me about a zebra who put his soul in a rock. Is that possible? I always thought that a soul was, well, you. It is. But it is a dark and cold magic that can do such things. What you describe is a soul jar,
Lakunai said in her distant voice.
But I don't understand. How does something like that work?
I walked to the door, opened it, and was greeted by a reek of burnt apples smothered in melted rubber. Gagging, I closed the door and rested my back against it. Okay, there was gross and then there was that. Lakunai seemed to be listening to something. Her goddess, I assumed.
Imagine if you were to take a gun, something special and inherent to you, and then you placed within it a piece of your soul. That gun would retain the resilience of your soul. Perhaps it would never jam or rust. It might always be oiled. Perhaps even more accurate than identical firearms. In extraordinary circumstances, perhaps it might fire an extra bullet or two before needing reloading. To you, it would simply be a weapon, but to anyone else, it would be a weapon beyond any of its kind. All right, so what's the catch? Because that sounds way too good to be true,
I said as I looked up at her, rubbing my runny nose with a hoof. Lakunai smiled sadly.
The catch is that, so long as your soul is here, you can never pass into the ever after. And there is a price paid for rendering something eternal. Souls do not heal, and it would take an exceptional pony to render their soul thus and not suffer horrifically for it.
I closed my eyes, trying to get my brain to work right. What had Priest said earlier? About her healing like...
What if you had, I don't know, like a healing talisman? A really powerful healing talisman.
Like the kind that had stuffed my guts back into me in the clinic.
And you made it a soul jar. Could it keep you alive forever? Even if you were vaporized?
Lakunai looked intrigued.
Perhaps.
I imagined the pink egg I'd seen earlier. Just like the one I'd seen back in Fluttershy's clinic, but with a tiny, ghostly rampage stuffed inside. Indestructible, powered by the soul trapped within, remaking Rampage again and again. It didn't explain what she'd done, any of her other abilities, or Glory's theory that it wasn't simple madness, but it did explain how she could get turned to ash and still reform.
Is there any way to free a soul from a soul jar?
Her lips curled in a slight smile.
For that, you would need a very special book. I don't suppose you know where. In Canterlot, perhaps. In the Ministry of Image.
Something was off. Years of poker had taught me the little tells that something was awry. The hint of a smile. The tone. Everything.
We have been searching for one for a very long time. In Canterlot?
I huffed.
May as well be in the core.
It may, she replied softly.
We know of one book for certain, but there may be others. A copy was seized by the OIA, but whether it was turned over to the Ministry of Image or not is unknown.
Then her eyes looked at my pitbuck, her smile widening.
But perhaps you possess a means to obtain it from the OIA hub, yes?
I gave a snotty sniff, narrowing my eyes slightly. Maybe it was due to Caprice's games, but I just wanted to know for sure who was pushing my buttons.
Huh. Funny. What kind of goddess wouldn't know? We do not need to divulge every...
I smiled.
Gotcha,
I said with a little smirk.
Goddess, right? Mind letting Lacunae back in? We are the infinite and all-knowing goddess. We do not.
But the goddess was now hissing her words in pain.
Nothing can. We. Ugh.
She clenched her head as she trembled.
This is unbearable. How does she tolerate it?
Right. Lacunae okay. Goddess not okay.
Hey, you okay?
I'm sure that somewhere P21 was grinding his teeth. Suddenly, she swayed and collapsed onto the bed.
That is most disagreeable,
Lacunae said softly.
So, I guess that the goddess doesn't like Hoofington. Hoofington screams in my dreams. I have become used to it. I fear the goddess has not.
Suddenly her eyes widened.
And I fear she is very put out by your irreverence. Yeah? Well, insecure goddesses don't impress me,
I said as I pulled out Cupcake's memory orb.
I've seen Luna and Celestia. They didn't act all-knowing. There was a hell of a lot they didn't know. I don't have time to waste on a goddess that pretends to.
Lacunae closed her eyes for a long moment.
Oh yes, very put out. Are all alicorns like that? Like you?
I asked as I put the orb away.
No. Most are extensions. We exist within her, and within her we act to carry out her will. But we remain ourselves. She can dictate our actions as she wishes. I am an aberration. So you're a mutant alicorn?
I asked with a little grin, but she smiled and nodded politely.
I have been in Hoofington for many years. I am resistant to the screams of the city. Few alicorns can survive in it for long. In some places, it is physically damaging,
she said with a little shudder. I wonder if she was referring to enervation, or if this was yet another horror of the wasteland that I just hadn't encountered yet.
I'm pretty sure she wants me to find a book for her. It is magic she lacks,
Lacunae agreed. I paused, frowning in thought.
Can it help Rampage? I do not know,
Lacunae replied softly.
We have only hints at its power. Right.
I sighed, rubbing my muzzle.
Well, good to know.
Then I sniffed as the rubbery smell increased. There was a soft knock from the hall. I glanced at Lakunai, then opened the door.
I made breakfast. Lunch? Brunch.
Glory said, trotting in with a tray balanced between her wings. She turned and presented something that looked like mashed sugar apple bombs soaked in milk and wrapped in a fried egg, then burned to crunchy sticks of carbon. I lifted one, wrinkled my nose, and took a bite. Somehow she'd managed to make it charred on the outside and gooey within.
I had to improvise on a lot of the ingredients.
I chewed thoughtfully for a few moments.
Not bad. Is that vinegar?
She smiled and nodded.
Huh. Pretty good, actually.
Glory beamed. I'd probably just made her day as I slurped down the rest of the interior and then munched the crunchy shell. I levitated another to Lakunai.
You want one?
The alicorn shied away as she politely asked,
Blackjack, are you by any chance part dragon?
By morning I felt, if not better, at least decent. Between Priest's healing and Sakashi's tonics, I'd coughed up most of the sludge in my lungs, and my throat no longer sounded like a rusty tin can full of nails. While I had to admit that the smell was off, Glory's cooking really wasn't that bad. I thought that what she could do with the few ingredients rattling around in our backpacks was pretty creative. Rampage promptly told me that, if I suggested she try one, she would be aiming for me with her vomit this time. I took stock of my armaments, laying each weapon on the bed before me. The Dragon Claw for close-in work, then Cupcake's .44 Magnum revolver, after that the 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, and finally Taurus's rifle. The rest I'd traded, along with surplus ammo for these. Of course I'd kept Folly, but to be honest, I didn't know who'd buy a gun with impossibly rare ammo. While the IF-33 would be tempting, I barely had enough ammo for a clip, and the 22mm gun had been trashed. With the exception of incendiary bullets, I'd blown through most of the specialty ammo we'd picked up at Ironshod Firearms R&D. I'd hoped we'd come across some more soon, especially the explosive rounds. The Age of Security combat armor had pockets and holsters for most of these weapons. I had to admit, I felt better wiggling into my armor than I had in a while. While I did miss my old security barding, the polymer and ceramic combat armor more than made up for it. Some spray paint, and I was just security again. Best of all, Charity had used a stencil and some white paint to mark the rearing filly on my rump. I secured the weapons, clips, and a handful of healing potions I'd acquired, and made my way downstairs.
Blackjack. Wow.
Glory muttered, her eyes lighting up at the sight of me. No helmet? P-21 asked with a little frown.
It cuts off my vision and hearing too much. Plus, it's uncomfortable as all hell,
I said as I saw that Rampage was now charity-aged. Apparently, while Glory's own cuisine was too much for my friends, Rampage had gone out of her way to get every remotely edible bit of meat of our packs cooked up. Growing up, even with the assistance of a healing talisman, clearly used up a lot of calories. I really preferred my sugar apple bombs. Glory had assisted her with some mixture of nausea, fascination, and disappointment that she wasn't allowed to indulge in any culinary experimentation. He just looked at me like I was doing something stupid again.
What?
I asked levelly. Nothing, Blackjack. It's great armor, he said before going back to his carrot crisps, adding just under his breath, boom, headshot. Yeah, like he had room to talk. He still wasn't using any barding, period. Still, maybe I should reconsider the headgear. I looked at Lakunai.
What about you? Do you need armor?
Black mourner's lace hardly seemed like adequate protection to me. She looked at me. Or, rather, at my horn.
I will be fine. Are you sure? I mean, P21 likes to be all sneaky, but you're a little too, big for sneaking. I am fine, thank you, she answered. Okay, just saying, I'm pretty sure Celestia and Luna weren't bulletproof, so no harm in wearing something. Blackjack, I don't need armor. I have magic, she said with a small smile of irritation. Right. Of course you do, because you're part unicorn. You can do magic. Excuse me, I said as I stalked over to the kitchen, muttering sourly under my breath about big horned alicorns and their magic. I could sing away while blasting ghouls. Could she do that? Once everything was set, I gave the house a parting look and locked the front door, feeling slightly less secure in the knowledge that any pony with some skill and a bobby pin could open it. Oh well, not much I could do about that now. As a pleasant surprise, Glory's food didn't taste much different on the trip back out and into a paper bag that Ditzy kept in her wagon for just such occurrences. I found 2 boxes in the back, wedged myself between them, and did everything I could to avoid screaming, crying, wetting myself, or taking my mind off my striped friend. Philly Rampage looked oddly like Silverbell's striped sister as the 2 sat in the back. I kept my magic grip on the revolver. If I saw a skull appear on her flank, I was going straight into Sats. Glory and Lakunai flew at our flanks. Ditzy had stared at the alicorn with some nervousness, but of course she hadn't said anything. I had to admit, the sight of the lace-draped alicorn was decidedly surreal. Then again, I was traveling with a pony with a soul thingy lodged within her and a hallucination that liked cards, on my way to liberate my stable. Reality was now a lot more subjective. Then P21 peeked out the back with a small frown. Why didn't he freak out at the sky? Blackjack. Oh,
I grunted in reply. What is that? He asked as he peered through his binoculars. I moved to the back, careful to avoid looking at the clouds above and the ground way, way below. What is what? I asked, and then frowned as I spotted a black speck behind us. What is that? I lifted Taurus's rifle and sighted through the scope. At first, I thought it was the Enclave. Maybe Dusk was coming to finish off Glory. But there was something off about how it moved, and I couldn't see any mounted weapons. Its wings were just as big as Lakunai's, and it was gaining on us. Fast. Really fast. Behind us! I shouted as the creature rolled faster than I could follow with the scope. Ditzy, get us on the ground! I yelled as it swept over us. I heard the buzz of Glory's beam weapons crackle as she shot at it. My stomach rose in my throat as every terrifying nightmare I had about falling rose in my chest. Ditzy was getting us to the ground by the fastest means possible. Straight down. As she dove, I saw the flash of beam guns and flickers of lightning from our airborne friends. After that, I was just holding tight as half of Ditzy's wares battered P21 and me. Rampage laughed in delight, and even Silverbell appeared more thrilled and less scared by the drop. Just before we hit, Ditzy flattened out, flying over the rubble-strewn fields of Miramare. The wagon suddenly lurched to the side as its cover ripped, 4 sets of brown claws tearing open the canopy. Something growled overhead, and I wasted no time thrusting Taurus's rifle upright and blasting away blindly. With a snarl, it released the wagon, and Ditzy was able to pull up over the main building. Get ready to jump out! I yelled. The wagon came to a stop, and the three of us spilled out. I could have kissed the ground, if we weren't facing some kind of clawed, winged, flying thing trying to kill us. It wasn't in sight, but I doubted that would last.
Get the door open. Quickly!
I said as I nodded at the door to the locker room.
We have got to get out of sight.
I looked over at the ghoul Pegasus.
Best to get out of here. It'll be after us.
And oh, how I hoped that was true and that this wasn't some sort of ridiculously aggressive predator with a taste for ghoul flesh.
Thanks, Ditzy. I owe you a new canopy now.
She grinned and shrugged, then winked a cloudy eye at me and took off. I made sure to fire a few rounds at anything that might be a bat-winged thing. To my relief, I didn't see anything go after the damaged wagon. Rampage looked at the duffel bag between my shoulders that held her spiked armor.
I hate being little. How am I supposed to kick tail like this?
She said as she gestured at herself.
Oh, you'll find a way. I have no doubt about that,
I assured her. Behind us, the door clicked open.
Quick, get inside.
If we were fighting something that flew, the lower the roof, the better. We disappeared inside just as the winged thing flashed over us. Whatever this thing was, it was fast. Really damn fast. I just closed the door when an oozing brown stinger punched right through the heavy metal. I reeled back, blasting at the appendage. It jerked free with a metallic squeal, leaving a hoof-sized hole. A bright blue eye pinked through and then narrowed.
Peekaboo,
a low feminine voice growled.
Pika this,
I muttered as I fired the rifle, but the eye jerked away with a laugh.
Well, at least it's a happy monster.
Great, so you won't be adopting it then? P-21 asked as he took a magic grenade and carefully positioned it at the base of the door, so that any pony opening would flick off the stem of the weapon. We quickly moved further into the locker rooms. It wasn't trying to come in through the doors. Maybe it was going to try to enter through the second floor to flush us out.
Well, you know, it could have some sort of horribly tragic sob story,
I said as I rushed to the Marauders' lockers. Actually, given my track record with these kinds of things, it was probably likely. I selected Doof's locker and typed Mama. There were a stack of papers, a memory orb. Of course there was a memory orb. And some large boxes of ammo. In the back was a gun? It was a short tube about 2 feet long, with a mouth grip stock. Really? It resembled the biggest single-shot gun I'd ever seen before. A heart was carved in the stock with the words, Twist plus Doof, and somebody had painted Persuasion on the barrel. No time for reading, and certainly no time for memory orb. I dumped them in my bag and turned the gun over. It sure wasn't something that I'd ever seen in an iron-shod firearms catalog.
What the heck is this?
I asked with a frown.
It sure isn't any iron pony.
What's what? P-21 asked, and I showed it to him. It's a grenade rifle, Blackjack.
Oh, great. Enjoy then,
I said as I pushed the tube into his hooves. His eyes went round. Blackjack, it's a gun!
It's a grenade gun,
I countered.
You do grenades, so logically you should be fine with it.
His eyes went even rounder. Blackjack, there is nothing logical about that. I sighed and slid him the ammo.
Look, I trust you. Trust yourself and ante up. This isn't some gun you point and shoot, right?
He frowned in worry, but nodded.
Gotta figure out angles and delays and stuff?
He nodded again, and I tapped his forehead.
Then it is right up your alley, Egghead.
He sure didn't look happy about it, but he took the weapon and the grenades and slipped them into his saddlebags. And if I was wrong and he was feeling shoot blackjacky, at least it'd be quick. Now there was just the question of how we would connect with Glory and Lacunae. Unless Miss Big Purple Horn had a magical location spell, and I wouldn't put it past her if she did, we'd have to go out, or they'd have to come in. If I were the flyer, I wouldn't want to be stuck inside, so I guessed she was somewhere on the roof waiting for us to come out to the second story.
We can get out through the crater,
I muttered.
but we need to tell Glory so they don't come in and have us chasing each other in circles.
He frowned, then dug through his bag and scribbled a word on a piece of garbage. Rads. Hook it onto the hole on the door and let's go, he said as he carefully unhinged the gun and slid a grenade into it. I did as he asked. Unless the monster was standing right outside, the pair would see it when they checked the door.
Why rads?
Rampage asked. It's the official term for measuring the intensity of magical spell radiation, he explained as he looked back at us. So, unless that monster has cracked open a copy of Scientifica Equestria or a big book of arcane science... Hey, what are you doing? I swept him up in my hooves and gave him a hug. Blackjack, let me go! I've got a grenade! A whole lot of grenades! Blackjack!
I've got a smart pony,
I said to Rampage with a grin. In the main hall, I kept my eyes up. Vermin had gotten in. Huge bloated mice that weren't much more threatening than radroaches, but still packed a wicked bite. I still wished the EFS would give me some kind of scale of bad guyness, but the bars were just red or blue. I had to watch for something a bit more substantial. I hadn't realized that something substantial was watching for us. As we made for the stairs down to operations, I heard the low growl rumble through the halls. My mane did the pony poking as we looked at all of the open doors. Was it that bar by the barracks? The gift shop? Maybe somewhere above. Of course not. I just turned the corner to go down the stairs into operations when a great leonine shape pounced up at me. Its mangy hide was covered in bald patches and sores, but that did little to detract from its crushing weight or sharp fangs and claws. And wings. And stinger? What the fuck, Wasteland? This had to be one of Chimera's critters, right? How else do you stick a lion, bat, and scorpion together? Knocked on my back, I had no choice but to keep rolling. If it pinned me, I'd be dead. Fortunately, it had to hop to the top of the stairs first, and so I found my footing and levitated the shotgun in my white magical grip just as it started a second pounce. Sats lined up 3 shots to its head. 3 of the shots stripped great bloody swaths away from its face and shoulders. But that didn't kill it. I hopped away, avoiding a strike by its stinger tail as I fired and moved away. Its claws scraped horribly on my barding, and I was very glad all I'd face was a bruise. For the moment. Another one! P-21 shouted around the mouth group of persuasion as he pointed it towards the door on the second floor. The weapon made a curious thump, and sent the grenade up to the second floor, where another of these monsters was starting down after us. The explosion took off the creature's legs. Unfortunately, there were more behind it, and they were far more wary. Rampage tugged at the drawstrings of my duffel bag where it had fallen.
Blackjack, why'd you have to use knots? I need my gear. I'm a little busy,
I yelled, jumping and moving as quickly as I could.
Come on, I can't rampage like this. I need my ripper. Hoof claws, something.
I sent my dragon claw skittering across the floor towards her.
Thanks,
she said happily, and started to saw through the knots.
Rampage!
I yelled in exasperation. P-21 smirked. Yes, he was actually smirking, as he fired another grenade to the top of the stairs. She blinked, looked cross-eyed down at the weapon in her jaws, and then rolled her eyes. She let out a filly-ish squeal as she raced to the monster and hugged its back legs with all of her hooves. Her head jerked back and forth as she sliced into the thick tendons behind its knee. It let out a roar as it staggered, and I was able to move away from it and reload with slugs. The monster then swung its tail and speared Rampage through the side. She twisted, grabbing the scorpion stinger in her hooves and starting to slice through that instead, as blood foamed around the dragon claw. She simply continued to hold tight and slash away at the stinger tail. The monster, seemingly confused by the squirming filly's refusal to die, cut to the chase and pulled her towards its maw. Unfortunately for it, that meant taking its eyes off me. I pressed the barrel of the shotgun against its head and took off half its skull. As it spasmed and flopped, Rampage was thrown free. One last shot, and it went still.
We have to keep running.
Always with the running, P-21 muttered as he limped down the stairs. Rampage wasn't walking much better as her mouth foamed, but the hole in her side was healing with pink light. Once we got downstairs, I slammed the door shut behind us. I noticed Rampage was already intact, but still dripping white foam from her lips.
You okay?
Not the best question to ask her, but still.
Poisoned,
was all she rasped. I pulled out one of the anti-venoms Glory had made for rad scorpion stings and poured it down her throat. At once, she gagged and clutched her throat, falling over.
Rampage?
I asked in alarm, dropping beside her. Had I somehow made it worse?
That tastes disgusting,
she coughed. I rolled my eyes and licked the end of the bottle. Okay, so it was a little bitter.
You big baby. I am not a baby. I'm older than both of you two combined,
she said as she pointed at me with a scowl.
You've just got a mutant tongue, that's what.
Hey, could we focus here? P-21 started to say as Rampage charged at me. I stuck out a hoof and pushed against her forehead. Even small, she nearly shoved me off my feet.
Oh yeah? Better check,
I said, sticking my tongue out at her. Rampage blinked, then tackled me with a roar. It wasn't nearly as effective as it would have been if she was normal-sized.
Oh yeah, really mutated, just like these bruises,
she said as she swung her hooves at me.
Aw, some pony needs her nap. She's all cranky.
Ladies! P-21 shouted, making us both look at him. Imminent mortal peril here. Chimera monsters hunting us down, and you two are... Oh, I cannot believe you two. He sat down, pulling his mane before he jabbed a hoof at both of us. Do not make me put you two in corners. Now, are we going, or do you two want to keep acting like 2-year-old foals? We both stared at him for a moment, then pointed at each other in unison and said in chorus, She started it. Traveling through the operations center gave me a sense of deja vu. I'd fed Minty fresh to a raider trying to get information out of him. Glory. I was really glad that Glory wasn't down here again. P-21 had strung a wire across the bottom of the stairs and up overhead, then had me tie 3 frag grenades by their stems. Jerk the wire, grenades pop free. Boy, I was glad he was on our side. Hey, the dealer whispered from a dark doorway. You got a second?
Not right now.
P-21 looked at me. Blackjack? Great. Now I was starting to act crazy. Crazier anyway.
Just go away. I am not crazy anymore, and I don't need you creeping me out, okay? I've got monsters to deal with, and Rampage, and Stable 99, and you know what? This relationship is just not working out. It's not you, it's me. Okay? So just go away and stop bugging me.
I smiled to the old pale pony as pleasantly as I could, then saw the pair staring at me. P-21 repeated himself in a far more unsettled tone. Blackjack, who are you talking to?
No pony! Okay. I'm just... Oh, boy.
I sat down hard and blurted.
Sometimes I see this pale horse who has a real fetish for cards, and he likes being all cryptic and mysterious, and I think he's some crazy part of my brain, but I'm not crazy anymore, so I don't need to talk to him, so he just needs to go away.
I took a deep breath, glaring at the old buck.
Right now!
The old buck just nudged his hat back, looking at me with an amused smile.
Okay,
Rampage said brightly, grinning at P-21.
Suddenly my problems don't seem quite so bad.
You killed Thorn, he replied bluntly, taking away her grin as he sat next to me. This has been going on for a while.
Yeah, since Glory got branded,
I admitted.
I mean, I kinda had hints before then, but it was after she got branded that he started showing up for chats.
Why didn't you tell us? He asked in a slightly hurt tone.
Well, I mean, you were just getting over wanting to kill me. You are over that, right?
His eyebrows arched as he looked at me coolly.
Okay, mostly over that. Anyway, Glory was hurt. I felt completely useless. Then we fought Deus and the Zodiacs, and there were all the problems in Flank, and I just wanted to make it seem like I had it together, okay? That I could tough it out.
He just shook his head. Blackjack, you're an idiot. You sing while chopping up ghouls. You befriend any monster that seems the slightest bit depressed. You seem to make enemies with shocking regularity. And you think that seeing things that aren't there is too much. Now, I figured you were crazy when you stopped Daisy from bashing my head in, and nothing I've seen has changed that much. He nudged my shoulder with his hoof. You might be one twigged mare, but you're also a good pony, and a good friend. Rampage looked from me to P-21 and then asked, So, you two gonna kiss or what? The dealer just smiled and chuckled softly, shaking his head. Immediately we both went bright red. P-21 stammered and pointed at me. Kiss? Her? She's a mare! Rampage broke into giggles as P-21 scowled. I don't even like her like that. Really? I have grenades, you know. I just smiled and shook my head, then stepped past the dealer into the room. The office had once been some pony's living quarters, but clearly the Enclave had cleaned house before abandoning Miramare. There hadn't been much in there to begin with, just a terminal I hadn't even bothered to try accessing. Locks were one thing, but I had no clue how to... I might not, but...
P-21, I need you. Right now,
I shouted. Rampage's giggles exploded into peals of laughter. He stepped in with a look promising to find some way to murder a certain striped pony.
It's not for sex or a joke,
I added quickly. I stepped over to the terminal.
Can you access this?
His scowl disappeared. Maybe. Let me see it. He hobbled up to the machine. Oh, blast it. It has a huge password. Better not be Mare setting up more sex dates. Rampage walked in, rubbing tears of mirth from her cheeks. He started his magic as I tapped my left hoof on top of the monitor. Then he hit a key and the terminal let out a beep. Huh. Go figure I'm in on my third try. That was lucky, he said, pleased at the turn of events. Yeah, luck. I looked over his shoulder. And so much for luck. Most of the files were auto-deleted. Looks like just garbage in here. Then he moved the cursor over one entry. Wait, here's one. Too minty fresh. From Lighthooves. Nice job getting that confession. I knew that Dashite was just itching to tell us her true contempt for the Enclave. Morning Glory's whole family is no better, really. It's in their blood. Can you believe she'd accuse us of misconduct? Where is her loyalty? Her sense of duty? Her honor? Ah, well. As long as she has that surfacer terrorist assisting her, there's not much we can do. Since she's insisted we brand her, I suppose that's what we'll have to do. Such a pity. We were making some real progress investigating potential cures for the surface, but she's mucked up the whole operation. Now she's probably run off to Flank or Megamart. I suppose we'll have to hope Yellow Rivers offers better fruit. Get ready to relocate. I wanted to shoot some pony. Actually, I'd already wanted to shoot him, but this moved him back to the top of the list. But oddly, despite my horn twitching with the need to put a hole in the screen, something held me back.
Something's wrong,
I muttered.
Back out. All the way out.
He frowned and did so. I looked at the screen and selected the first password option from the screen of gobbledygook. Then the second. Then the third. Exact match. I repeated it 2 more times, and every time the third guess brought up the password, no matter how I put the password in.
That bastard!
I muttered.
I would like to buy a clue, please. Something in size 4?
Rampage said as she peeked up from between my legs.
This is why Dusk tried to kill Glory. This wasn't for me. This was to put Dusk on Glory's trail.
And if she'd been a little more lucky with her Nova Surge shots, she would have killed her right in front of us. I read the message again and tapped the screen.
Yellow River. That's for me.
Yellow River? What's Yellow River? P21 asked in confusion.
Well, if you've ever seen me drink a whole lot of Sparkle Cola at once.
Rampage began with a little smirk.
I don't know. But he wants me to go there. A trap? A setup? It's something.
I gritted my teeth. I had to go. It was the only lead I had for helping Glory at the moment.
He's playing me.
Like the goddess. So what are you going to do?
I'm going to play along. Then I'll play rough and dirty when the time comes for it. Find something to hang him with. And if all else fails, feed him to a hungry raider. Alive,
I muttered. Yeah, right. Like any pony would do that, P21 began. And then our eyes met. His grin slowly slid away as he muttered sheepishly, "Oh. Damn. Awkward." A loud explosion echoed through the operations hallway, followed immediately by a bestial roar of pain. Saved by the monster, P21 muttered. Blackjack, if there's a way out, now's the time. I agreed, giving the dealer a cold glare. Not that it mattered. He wasn't really there anyway. I just hated that disingenuous look of innocence he wore. We made our way to the storage utility that had been blown out. Both of us took a pill of Radex, and I held one out to Rampage. She just snorted and slid down into the hole in the concrete pipes in the floor. My pit buck immediately began to spike, the readout showing a blue pony turning green, then yellow as the rads increased. I sure hoped this wasn't going to be a long tunnel, or the whole thing would be moot. Thankfully, we were able to reach the open pipes at the base of the crater, and sure enough, there was Lacunae, waiting patiently. Was it just me, or did she look even, well, more alicorny? Her coat glistened and her horns seemed to shimmer with potency. Radiation did an alicorn good, apparently.
Good. You made it. I was about to come in after you. We must be quiet. Glory is nearby.
I took a look around and my jaw dropped. That was a fuck ton of red bars. I passed P-21 some Radaway, then gulped some down myself, not even getting to savor the sharp, orangey flavor, before the four of us crawled up out of the crater to where an armored vehicle lay on its side. Glory sipped a packet as well, looking at me nervously.
Oh, good. You made it out,
she said with clear relief.
We're surrounded by manticores. Manta-whatsies?
I muttered as we crouched in the hall. Everywhere I looked, there were more of the lion-bat-scorpion hybrids.
How do you know what they are? Manticores are a constant threat in the wasteland, though they're not usually so well organized.
I'd thought for sure that they had to be something from Project Chimera, but apparently some abominations the wasteland just whipped up on its own.
I think that she's controlling them somehow. She who?
I asked as I looked through P-21's binoculars. Oh, she, her. Now this had to be something from Chimera. The tawny pony prowled back and forth on the roof of the main building. Her legs ended in razor-sharp claws rather than hooves, and the wings on her back were leathery instead of feathery. The scorpion tail she possessed snapped and stabbed at the manticores that didn't shy out of her way quickly enough, and with her lips parted I could see a set of wicked fangs. As disturbing as she was, it wasn't as bad as the flock of manticores lounging around the airbase. I couldn't see how we were going to get 100 feet without one of them spotting us. And the radiation was starting to build up in us.
Okay, we need to get the heck out of here,
I said as I looked at the twisted wreckage concealing us. Rampage was examining a heap of bones and some frayed and charred uniforms, while P-21 seemed to be checking his grenades and Glory took another Rad-X.
Would you like to return to chapel?
Lacuna asked casually.
Well, yeah, that'd be great, but I don't know how we're going to get there without all of them piling on us,
I said and then frowned.
Are you telling me you can return all of us to chapel? That's miles away.
She took a long, slow, luxurious breath as she looked at the glowing crater.
Right now? Most certainly. Right.
10 or 15 more minutes here and it'd be moot. I trotted over to Rampage, who seemed to be staring down at the bones with a wistful look.
Come on, Rampage. We're leaving. Huh? Oh, okay, yeah,
she said as she crawled through the gutted vehicle. For a moment, I almost joined her, but then I moved to look down at the same pile of bones. This far into the transport, the body was a little more intact. Nothing valuable, of course, just a rotten, scorched uniform with 2 tin ID tags hanging around her neck, the junk of 2 centuries ago. Slowly, I took a closer look at the name stamped in the tin. Twist. I stared at another of Macintosh's marauders. Slowly, I bent down and nudged the brittle bones. Her hooves had pinched something between them, bundling them in the rags of her uniform. With care, I liberated the objects from her rags. The pictures were all partially burned, discolored, or water-stained. There were little mouth-written notes on the bottoms, smeared but still barely legible. Twist on a playground next to a foal so alike that only Twist's glasses really set them apart. Weren't we alike back then, Applebloom? Twist standing in a candy shop with a sign that read peppermint under 2 crossed candy canes. Too bad about my candy shop, huh? Twist standing proudly amid a line of recruits with a buzzed mane, the youngest and smallest, but looking eager to fight. Big Macintosh loomed beside her, giving her a brotherly glance. Look at my mane, it's so short. An older and more mature Applebloom posing for a picture in front of a stable door marked with an immense number 2. Looking good, Applebloom. Looking really good. Twist putting Big Macintosh in a hoof lock as the rest of the Marauders cheered and laughed at the sight. Psalm smiling in reserved amusement, Stonewing grinning as Jetstream leans against him, Vanity shaking his head with a smile. Even Doof having a great time. Then a picture of the Marauders all gathered together in prance. Her grin around the peppermint stick goes from ear to ear. My family. The next picture was of Twist and 3 red-marked zebras. As sad as she looked, they appeared haggard, yet also proud. She's hoof-bumping the leader. Last of the Prodators. All but one of the Marauders standing in grim lines on one side of a casket, the Ministry mares on the other. Applejack resting her head upon the corner of the coffin as Twilight Sparkle holds her shoulders. Applesnack's eyes looking at the orange mare past Celestia giving a eulogy. I had never seen a look of such repressed pain on a buck's face before. Twist just looks lost. One of her in the hospital, looking hurt, but Vanity, Echo, and Applesnack are with her. 3 out of 8 friends. Her eyes show far more pain than joy. She wasn't smiling in the last picture. Oh, her lips were curled at the edges. But there was no mirth in her eyes as she stood alone on a tank, sergeant stripes on her uniform. She had the eyes of a ghoul, flat and lifeless, and eager to die. And so she had. There was one last picture that had fallen away, and I almost missed it. I recognized the young Applebloom as an almost spitting image of Applebot. I didn't know who the orange Pegasus or the unicorn with the purple mane were. They seemed to be in the middle of a fight in a garden, surrounded by statues as Twist looked on with a sad smile. The worst day of my life was when I got a cutie mark, and you didn't. I pressed the pictures back between her hooves as I heard the others call out a warning, and bent my nose to nuzzle her skull. I prayed that she'd finally found rest at last. With one look back, I returned to the others. There was a brilliant flash of purple light, and the world disappeared. Okay, I admit that I was a little frustrated. I had another monster pony after me with a small army of flying monsters. I had no doubt as I lay there in the post office, sucking down my 3rd Rataway, that she was probably already looking for us. Worse, if she found out we were in chapel.
Why so gloomy?
Adagio asked lazily as the quartet collected around me.
If it's about Thorn, it happens. Sometimes a colt won't even stay an hour before they take the walk.
I gave a little smile to the blue colt.
Thanks, but it's not that. It's just that I need to travel way up north, but it's suddenly become a lot more complicated.
P-21 nodded. Yeah, it has, he said as he looked at a crude map Priest had drawn for us. We'd have to travel all the way south to flank, head into the hills to cross the river upstream of the dams, north through Society territory, past the Collegiate ponies in Hoofington U, past all the Enclave at the Skyport, or sneak past Paradise, get past the Steel Rangers, and cross the river again near the coastway up north. It was going to take weeks. The Kunai wasn't familiar enough with anywhere up north to teleport to it, even if it was inside her range.
So why don't you just take the boat?
Medley asked, giving us a look that questioned our intelligence. P-21 and I stared at each other. In all of our time in chapel, no pony had ever uttered the syllable boat in our hearing. There's a boat? P-21 asked sharply. She rolled her eyes.
Stable ponies don't know nothing. Of course there's a boat,
the chartreuse unicorn filly said.
The seahorse goes up and down the river all the time. Her captain's a bit off, but she's the only one brave enough to risk it.
I looked at her skeptically and then took out the Hoofington edition of the Wasteland Survival Guide. After flipping through a bit, I found an entry on the Hoofington River. No visit to the Hoofington area is complete without spotting the Hoofington River. The largest river in all of Equestria in our times, the Hoofington River runs north from Equestria's second largest lake to the sea. Its progress is only interrupted by the dams south of the city that continue to provide power to the region to this day. Now, you might be tempted to stop and take a swim, or if it's a rare dry day, take a drink. Take my advice and don't. Upstream contamination has made all the water mildly radioactive and tainted. That's led radigators and river serpents of prodigious size and appetite to spawn. Even if none of that gets you, the river is choked with debris and its current is powerful. All the rain goes somewhere, ponies. For those folks desperate to travel along the river course, there are always a few brave souls willing to make the trip for caps. The most successful ferry is the Seahorse, which is still operating even after years on the water. The passenger is recommended to bring plenty of caps for the trip. However, the captain is quite erratic in his pricing. Allegro nodded. Yeah, the captain is one rough, tough, twigged pony, but they're always good for getting us up and down the river. Doesn't deal in slaves, and so long as your caps are good, the captain's usually fair. Crazy, but fair. I looked at P21, beginning to see a pattern. He grunted sourly, looking at me. Ah, yes. Another unstable pony. Wonder if he's as twigged as you are.
What?
I said defensively to the snickers of the four. Giving P21 a slightly incensed look, I asked Allegro.
So when does the boat stop by Chapel? She's here right now, the colt said with a grin.
Now? You mean as in, right now? P21 asked as he and I looked at each other.
Yep, she's tied up under the bridge. Charity's doing her trading right now.
With one last look at each other, we turned and raced for the door. I really didn't know what to expect when I thought of the word boat. Could it carry 5 of us? Would it be safe? Fast? Would Sanguine anticipate us taking it? Would we have the caps the captain wanted? P21 found the concrete steps that led to the crumbling concrete slip underneath the bridge. Panting, we picked our way underneath and saw the hunk of junk that looked as if it should be lying under the river instead of floating atop it. Okay, maybe that wasn't fair. What did I know about boats? I just didn't think they should look so rusty. It was almost as long as the bridge overhead was wide. Maybe 70 or 80 feet? The hull had been patched and painted so many times it was hard for me to figure out what the original color was. It was made of wood with metal sheeting hammered over the top. I knew this because of all the places where the metal sheeting was no longer there. At the front of the boat was a small enclosed turret with 2 machine guns poking out. It looked as if there were 7 or 8 crew ponies, and the biggest buck of all of them was sitting at a card table staring at Charity with his forehooves crossed. With his scruffy black beard, anchor cutie mark, and scarred hide, I guessed he was the captain. Charity stared back undaunted, as if trying to will him to part with his caps. You better wait here, P21 said. I'll see if I can get us a ride.
Ah, great. Waiting,
I muttered as I sat with a grumpy frown as he trotted down and started trying to break into the staring contest. He might as well have been talking to a wall for all the notice he got.
Yeah, tell me about it,
said a mare beside the river.
So boring just waiting for 'em. They've been at it for hours.
The turquoise unicorn mare had a mane so filthy and chopped that I wasn't sure if it was blue, gray, or some mottled mix of the two. She wore a battered black cap complete with a skull and crossbones, like from a storybook. A leather eye patch covered her left eye. She swirled an amber drink in a bottle.
You want some? It's rum. or grog. One of the two.
She glared at the contents suspiciously.
Sneaky little drink. Sure,
I replied as I joined the inebriated mare, plopping down beside her and taking a swig. Rum, or grog maybe, I discovered was a bit sweeter than my preferred intoxicant.
That's not bad.
She offered her hoof.
Thrush. Blackjack.
I bumped it with my own. She eyed my security barding, leaning back and squinting as she fought to focus her gaze.
Security, security, security. Where have I heard that name before?
She suddenly pointed the bottle at me with a gasp.
Oh, you're that mare with the bounty, ain't ya?
I felt my mane start to prickle, but then she grinned.
Well, good for you. I always said that if you're doing something good enough for some pony to pay to want you dead, then you must be doing it pretty well. So you're not looking to collect?
She took another pull off the bottle, then burped.
Who, me? Collect for usury. That's funny. Fuck usury. Fuck her right up the ass with an anchor. Bitch wanted me to transport slaves for her.
She scowled at me.
Do you know what kind of mess slaves make? I mean, really, smell lasts forever.
She made an annoyed face.
So I told her to go fuck herself and every pony in paradise, and I think Equestria too while I was at it.
I grinned as she frowned and rubbed her chin.
I think I might have shot her too. Shot at her. One of the two. Really?
I said with a chuckle.
Well, I was drunk at the time, and I don't think she quite understood all the implications there, and she took it all like personally. Put a 10,000 cap bounty on my noggin. I don't think she realized most bounty hunters can't swim.
The turquoise mare muttered as she upended the bottle into her wide-open mouth. She swallowed, then blinked and stared into the bottle.
Gone? Gone. Why is it always gone? A great tragedy strikes the wasteland once again.
She looked at me through the bottom.
Ooh, wavy.
I smirked. I had been waiting for a special occasion to enjoy it. This would do. I floated out a bottle of wild Pegasus that Glory had bought.
Security to the rescue,
I said with a little grin. I might not be able to save ponies who needed it, but I could at least get some pony drunk who'd appreciate it. An hour later, I had a nice warm glow in my stomach that gave rise to a pleasant buzz spreading throughout my body.
So, what's your story, Thrush? Who, me? Story. I'm lucky if I got a limerick.
She cleared her throat.
There once was a pony named Thrush. Her mane was like a dirty old brush. But her daddy was a captain, and when his luck was cashed in on his boat, she'd have a serious crush,
she said as she balanced the bottle of wild Pegasus on the end of her horn. Since she had her horn stuck in the bottle, it wasn't that impressive.
No second verse? Same as the first,
she said with gusto, and I laughed, even though it made no sense at all.
I've been steering the seahorse all around Equestria. My daddy showed me all the neat little hidey holes and hazards to avoid. Normally I fly from Iron Mare to Friendship City, but I tuck up river to see what the eggheads or crusaders have scavenged up every now and again. Damn skilled fillies and colts.
She sighed as she tilted her head left and right, making the bottle rock on her horn.
Most boats are lucky to last a year on the water. I've lasted 3.
She looked at the dinged-up rust bucket with a look of love.
Saved my life being a captain, having some control.
Somehow, I doubted that there was nothing more to her than just 5 lines of verse.
So wait, you're the captain?
I asked in confusion. And then I gestured at the scruffy-looking buck with the thick beard.
Then who's he? Oh, him? Tar Boots. He's our quartermaster. He tells me where to go to make money, and I go there. It's not like I understand any of this business stuff. I just turn the wheel that points the seahorse in the right direction and try not to get sunk. Hasn't happened yet.
She let out a long, low belch, then smirked at me.
What? I've got the biggest hat that makes me the captain. I can't argue with logic like that,
I said with a laugh.
And you? How the heck does a mare go around with a big security on her body, shooting up the countryside?
I took a deep breath as I balanced the rum bottle on my horn. Okay, stuck my horn in the rum bottle. Ta-da!
Well, damn. If you're a limerick.
I coughed and cleared my throat.
Blackjack steps outside. She tries to do good and help. Poor Equestria.
Never underestimate the powers of inebriation for inspiration.
Anyway, now I'm trying to get way north. Going home, actually,
I said as I stretched over and showed her my Pip-Buck's navigation map.
See? Stable 99, way up top there. Oh, wow, up there, huh? Raider territory these days. Didn't know there was a stable up there,
she said as she rubbed her nose.
Well, I can drop you off here at Boardwalk. Just a quick stroll to your stable then.
She then looked skeptically at me.
Question is, can you follow the rules? Probably. Depends on the rules,
I said cautiously.
One, and this is a big one. Listen to the motherfucking captain.
She lifted her hooves in frustration.
I cannot tell you how vital rule number 1 is. I tell you to shoot, you shoot. I tell you to shut up, you shut up. I tell you to hide, then you hide. I tell you to swim for your life, then you swim for your life. 'Cause otherwise some pony is gonna shoot you. Probably me. Sometimes it feels like the day's not started without some pony shooting security,
I said with a resigned sigh.
That's the price of virtue,
she said with a grin before continuing.
2. Stay on the boat. You hop off for whatever reason and we gotta burn power to pick you up. Lots of places there isn't anywhere to pull in. You got flyers?
I nodded and she looked curious.
Then they really have to stay in. If they take off, they'll get 30 or 40 feet before the city picks them off. The city doesn't shoot things in the river?
I asked curiously.
Doesn't have to.
She pointed a hoof at where the city wall met the river. A curtain of white rolled along it.
See all that rough water? It's all busted up concrete and steel scrap. Besides, that close you got 10 minutes before the enervation sucks you dry. So no flying. I'll truss them up like a turkey myself if I have to,
I said with a nod, wondering just how one tied up an alicorn. Politely, I guessed. Tying up glory. That led into some downright disturbing neighborhoods of thought.
3rd, you pay for your own gas. That means spark batteries, gem cartridges, even raw gemstones. If you can't swing that, then you get to point your horn into a flux converter and channel it till it falls off. And trust me, it'll feel like it if you do. Right,
I said with a nod, watching as P-21 and the large gray tar boots strolled up.
Hey, P-21.
Hey, Blackjack. I got us a deal with Captain Tarboots here and... He stared at me. What, did I have something on my face? The gray pony interrupted him. Captain Thrush, got a request for 5 passengers. He broke off with a sigh. Captain. The turquoise mare blinked at him, and he coughed. Captain, you, have a bottle stuck to your horn again. She looked at him coolly and said, with as much dignity as she could muster,
I knew that. I did. One moment.
She rose to her hooves, her magic carefully unscrewing the bottle from her horn.
Excellent observation, Master Tarboots, but I'm afraid you'll have to tell this adorable little guy that I have already agreed to provide passage to this filly and her friends.
The scarred buck opened his mouth, and she raised a hoof.
No, Master Tarboots, this is an adventure.
I looked at her with a wide grin that was mirrored by the turquoise unicorn and bumped hooves against hers.
You bet. I'll get every spark battery I can, even if I have to tie Charity up in a sack to do it.
Okay, maybe I wouldn't go that far. Maybe I'd pay for them and then tie her up in a sack. The bucks stared on in shock as they looked from one of us to the other. Oh, sweet Celestia, muttered the grizzled buck as P-21 sat down on his rump with a groan. Oh no. There's two of them. There's two, the blue buck moaned in despair. Celestia, save us all. Footnote. Level up. New perk added. Ferocious loyalty. When you drop below 50% HP, companions gain DT.